It's April, the sun is shining, and I'm back with Barb from Dover Apothecary and Healthy, Well and Wise. And Barb, I read your article this month, and I want to share with you before we get started because it reminded me so much of my past. We've talked over the years about my heart situation and when it occurred. And one of the big components of your article this month was stress. And boy, it was a huge factor in my life. I had so much going on at the time, probably way too much on my plate.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize it. You're just trying to please people. You're trying to do everything right. And sometimes you
Mhm.
forget to take care of yourself. And it was, you know, reading your piece this month, and I'm going to let you explain it in a sec. It was gut wrenching because it just brought me back to all that stuff. And I realized how much other people need to listen, right? When their body's telling them, and they're just beat up. You get mentally and physically beat up, and you just need to recharge and you need to refocus and figure out who you are. With that in mind, I'm going to open the floor because it was a great piece. I really enjoyed reading it, but I want you to explain your scenario. Okay.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, it's sometimes things come home to visit us, and oftentimes other family members, loved ones, friends, you can see the situation unfolding itself. But one of the things that we always have to be incredibly mindful of is that the person themselves has to come to a certain realization or recognition of the place that they're in and actually be ready to accept outside help. And so, when you're doing all of the things right, when your nutrition is on and you have been exercising and you're making, the right choices regarding supplement and you've got family support and all of these things, and then somebody in your life crumbles under pressures that they see as real, see as critical, see as urgent, but they're actually a warped perspective that they've actually created and built this mountain of stones upon themselves. And so, that is why with my practice, with what, my husband has been experiencing, I am so incredibly proud of him that he actually had the strength to recognize that he needed outside help because, I was like Charlie Brown's mom in the background, wah, wah, wah.
Yeah.
And it's just when somebody is in that state of mind that nothing in the world seems like it makes sense anymore, you have to have other resources and you need other professionals that are hearing you and seeing you. And we were very fortunate that our family doctor was able to, and that my husband's coworkers have been really, really amazing because, what's come out of my husband's experience is other people do see him for a different person than he was seeing himself as. And that support and that care and that concern, it's done him a world of good. So he's stepped back. He's taking a little bit of time out. He's getting the right help beyond everything I've been able to offer as a nutritionist and as a wife of 40, almost 41 years and things like that. So it's recognizing there is other help out there, that there is a scope of practice that we need to lean into sometimes to get ourselves out of what's going on here. And recognizing that health isn't just above the neck or below the neck. It's this huge intersection interconnecting both. Because you can't have a healthy body when your brain isn't healthy, and you can't have a healthy brain if the body's not healthy. And we have to lean into ways to support people, help them recognize what it is that's happening with them, and then get them the right tools so that they can move forward and do that self work.
When you step back to, uh, again, with my scenario, when you step back and look at it, it all seemed irrelevant. All the stuff that was sort of you thought was right here in your focus, irrelevant. You just
Mhm.
got to sort of find that zone where you can let it all go and realize what's important to you. And you know what? It's good that you're able to accept that he's able to sort of look at it now. And I'm sure in a few months' time, he's just
Mhm.
going to look at it and go, wow, you know, it's behind me now. you've
Yeah.
got to look at how you're going to start it to make sure it doesn't come back on you. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those things, consistency, routine, things like that. I talked a lot in my last article about routine because I think that people need that. And when you crave
Hmm.
it and there's maybe two elements in your day that help you, it's such a
Right.
difference, right? Because they're consistent and it takes it out of that other moment. And you're like, oh, yeah, I like doing this. This is why I do this. So finding that
Hmm.
moment too for your husband will be particularly rewarding. And the other part we talked to, you and I talked off air about was, you know, it's I think generationally as men, sometimes we struggle a lot to recognize this. I know over the years, probably because of my family background, it's one of those
Hmm.
pressures where you have to be strong, you have to do this, you have to do this.
Yeah.
Well, that's, pardon the English, that's bullshit. I mean, you got to be able to
Mm.
take care of yourself and those around you in a loving and caring way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is totally right. You look at that work ethic, coming from a generation where you started a job and you retired from that job. And that is it's just not a thing anymore, right? People change their processes and ideas about what they want to do, like they change their clothing,
Yep.
because we do have the blessing of trying things on for size and seeing whether that resonates with ourself. And men of my husband's generation, your generation especially, being not necessarily the sole breadwinner for the family,
No.
but all of that responsibility and the way that that shapes what you feel you need to put yourself through, as opposed to owning yourself differently and having respect for yourself, because you can't continue to give and care for other people if you've not put anything in your own bucket. It just
Yep.
it can't be sustainable. And so when it gets to that point, unfortunately, a lot of people lose their self-confidence. And when that is eroded to a certain point, some people look for other substances to
Yeah.
light themselves up temporarily. And unfortunately, for instance, if it's alcohol, that first drink actually does have a relaxing effect on it. A lot of people don't realize drink number two automatically creates depression in the area of the brain that's responsible for controlling that. And so then suddenly it's the third drink or the fourth drink, and then there's some euphoria. But when that wears off, of course, there's that whole set of problems that's created. So, it's if people recognize that they're reaching for something that is not sustainably healthy for them, you realize you're not coping. And that's where that outside help and getting it sooner rather than later, because it has not been necessarily easy to get this put together and get all of these things in line for Brian to get the help that he wants.
Yeah.
But it's been a bit of a journey, and the first few sessions, it's been amazing how much he's learned from this already. So, I do in my own practice, I make sure that people understand that the work is on them, that the responsibility is on them, that I can help them, I can show them the tools, but I can't do it for
For them.
them.
No.
And that's not serving anybody properly by just taking over and doing it. So it's having, those tools to move ahead with, and like you said, knowing that they're for life, because it's easy to fall back into those old habits and patterns because they're just ingrained in us so deeply. And it's learning to move beyond and catching yourself before that you're headed down that slide again.
I
So true.
Lori from Purposely Unplugged, we do a podcast. And one of the things she has brought to my attention in the past that we've been working on is called family of origins. So those processes that have been ingrained, like you just said, for generations that you try and change, it
Hmm.
takes a long time to change those things. And that's something we have to come to terms with. I had a two-part question. First one was, um, we sometimes forget how resilient we are too,
Yeah.
like in a positive way. I mean, like when I look back at things in my life, I'm like, oh damn, that was a hard time, or we got
Yep,
through this, or we made this. But that resiliency, when you step back and look at it, when you're in a tough situation, it provides perspective that you can keep going.
it does.
And
It truly does.
my big question for you is, at that moment when your husband wanted to reach out for help, I know that was probably a very emotional moment for you and your husband, but at the same time too, like you said earlier, a relief, because now you can turn that corner, which I think is the message here.
Yeah, yeah. It was a massive relief. It obviously it was scary for both of us, but it really is within what we perceive as our weakest moment. Reaching out for help is it's absolutely the
It's the
bravest and
strongest moment. Yeah.
strongest part of ourselves. Like it's just that recognition
Yeah.
and
That's a societal thing,
recognizing,
eh? That's a
oh my
societal thing
gosh,
that we put out
it,
there, that you're weak, or if you're asking for
yeah,
help. Well, and it's so
yeah,
backwards. It's so silly, because
yeah.
if you can step forward, and the other part about this is, down the road, you can help other folks, right? Because you've
Hmm.
lived that experience and you understand how important it is to reach out and get help.
Yeah. And it's, and I've said this to other people and suddenly it resonated, is that check your self-talk for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
Put somebody else's face in front of your mirror, somebody that you care about, even if it's somebody you've never met before that reveals what they're struggling with. How would you talk to that person? What would you say if the scenario was identical? And then take that picture down and look at yourself. Why on earth would you deserve less than you would give to somebody else? Why? And it's just like when you stop and realize how mean we can be to ourselves, how absolutely cruel, bullies, if not abusive. And it's like, you don't deserve that. You absolutely don't. All you have to look around at is the dedication that you've given over the course of your life to everybody else. And you don't deserve to treat yourself like a bag of garbage. And, it was just like, what? Yeah, I do that. We all do
Yeah.
that periodically. You call yourself, oh, you idiot. And it's like, just check it. Try and check that language and, take that practice. Even if all you can do is, some people can't even look at themselves in a mirror. They think they loathe themselves that much. So there's a lot to examine. There's a lot to delve into. A lot of it is, stuff that we've just created in our brains from the time of early childhood. But we get to rewrite that story. The synapses and neurons in our brain, all of that can be reformed, reshaped, re-educated. And that's what, the counseling part is, the nutrition part of it. Of course, we need the nutritional support. If your cells don't have the tools,
Yeah.
there are so many other elements, taking out the substances that are harming our bodies, making sure we're getting fresh air and exercise, recreating a healthy sleep cycle, all of those and many more, spending time with your dogs, spending time with your children or grandchildren, but just recognizing that you do deserve everything that you've ever tried to give to somebody else is huge.
I think you're spot on. I mean, it's just kind of, uh, I don't know how many times I'll think, oh, I'll want to work on the podcast or the magazines on the weekend, and I refuse to let myself do it. I'm like, no,
Hmm.
this is my time. I do that Monday
Yep.
to Friday. I can go do other things now. And it's recognizing that, right? It's another component
Yep.
of all that stuff that we're talking about. The me time is critical, just to do what
Hmm.
you need to do to re energize or refocus. Down the road, I'm going to have
Completely.
to get your husband to fill in for you for a show so me and him can talk.
Hey, you know what? I
We'll
think
have
that
some
would
fun
be
with it.
fantastic. And, just want to make sure that everybody knows this is always with his permission and
Yeah.
encouragement,
Yeah.
because he does recognize that his story can be helpful to other people that are going through what he's going through. So that's, just to clear that up in case
It's a blessing.
anybody's concerned.
Cool. Anything else? Because it's a great article in this month's Hub, the April Hub with Barb. But is there anything else you want to add today?
I just, you don't need permission to look after you.
Yeah,
And a lot of people feel that self-care is selfish, and honestly, it's sometimes one of the most critical pieces to go forward, is to recognize when you're needing that help. So, reach out, even if it's talking to a friend, but just make sure you're asking for help, because, the alternative is just, it
it's not
too
healthy.
many people get hurt.
And it's the first step. And it's always the first
Yep,
steps that's the hardest, folks. But once you get there, you're on your way. It's
you
it's
sure
one step
are.
and you're on your way. Thanks
Yep.
for doing this great show today. Look forward to chatting with you next month. Take care, okay?
Okay. You too, Dave.